She never thought they would meet again this way, the one both loathed and loved by the entire empire. The second prince, whom she, who was once a maid, had dared to secretly love. Although Ilid is a noble Manish, he looks so wretched. Has he still not found his Aradhana? A Manish and an Aradhana are a pair of lovers connected by God. A Manish is an existence closer to God than humans. But a Manish must have their partner, an Aradhana. Once they recognize each other, they are fated to fall in love. For a Manish who cannot survive without an Aradhana, this love is both a blessing and a curse. The only thing she could be sure of was that she could not be his partner. She was just one of many Aradhana candidates. She had known for a long time that she could never be someone special to him. Even if it's not her, His Highness will surely find his Aradhana. But this act, if only it could alleviate even a little of his pain. A dazzling light appeared. She couldn't help but fall backward. A brilliant light shone all around. Many people shouted, "He's going berserk! Run!" 2 people stood at the center of the magic. What on earth is happening? The second prince called her Liana. She was very surprised. He drew close to her and asked why she was so late. He almost killed them all. Never leave me alone again. The beginning of it all. The memory of that day already felt so distant. The music announcing the start. The chandeliers sparkling like leftover stars. A wide and plentiful variety of refreshments, and a magnificently dressed nobles to match. Liana Theodore was also there at the time as a maid. They really looked like peacocks. Truly gorgeous. Natasha's personal maid and Liana's good friend, Deborah Carter. I heard it was glamorous, but I didn't expect it to be on this level. A ball held at the Imperial Palace is really different. Deborah said she had been here before. Their lady Natasha is a celebrity in high society. Natasha Baldwin, the second daughter of the Count Baldwin family. The dress she chose really suits the young lady. She's so dazzling even in a large crowd. Their young lady is a natural beauty. Looking at the two of them, Liana noticed the young lady glance in her direction. She didn't understand what was happening. She was afraid she had done something wrong. Deborah said, "The man talking to the young lady is His Highness the Prince, a very handsome, blonde man." The two of them whispered to each other at the side. His beauty was so extreme it was said to incite jealousy from everyone in the empire. I've heard many such rumors, but seeing him in person, he really is handsome. This feeling was unfamiliar to Liana. Until now, she had never thought she would one day have the chance to see such a noble person with her own eyes. Liana's gaze was already involuntarily fixed on him. It seems His Highness the second prince is very interested in their young lady. The two of them are a really good match. Liana felt a sense of loss. It was true. The prince's hair, as dazzling as the sun, and Lady Natasha's hair, the color of precious red wine, were as harmonious as a painting. As she was immersed in these pointless thoughts, he actually looked at her. "What's going on?" Deborah also noticed his gaze and found it strange. Liana didn't know either. The moment her eyes met those sapphire-like eyes, Liana thought, did a violent whirlwind just blow through here? If not for that strange phenomenon, why would her heart be beating so fast? It was a sign. At that time, she couldn't have known. Soon night fell. The two of them kept discussing the prince. Why did His Highness look their way? Liana just thought it was a coincidence. A feeling like the one she just had was too presumptuous for a maid like her. What they should be worried about was something else. If His Highness was truly interested in the young lady and problems arose between them, then calming the young lady would be their job. Prince Ilid was famous not just for his looks, but also for his philandering. Prince Ilid freely used his good looks. The young ladies flocked to his arms like moths to a flame. 3 months at the longest, 2 weeks at the shortest. That's his relationship cycle. Incarnation of love is his nickname. They could only pray that the young lady wasn't serious. At that moment, they came out. He was going to visit the Baldwin residence and arrange for a bedroom. The two of them flirted right there. The maids could only get nervous. Even if it was just for fun, the two of them looked like a perfect couple. Besides, the ripples from the storms caused by these nobles would all be borne by the servants. Natasha didn't refuse his invitation. He said that as long as Natasha was willing, he would even refuse His Majesty the Emperor. The protagonist could only feel, are all playboys this shameless? Who knew that their eyes would meet again by accident? The protagonist quickly turned her head away. They said their goodbyes like that. Deborah got in the carriage and said to her, the prince praised her attire. She mentioned that her dress was chosen by a capable maid. That's why he turned to look at her. Liana, a candidate for personal maid brought by Deborah. Very smart, knows what to do to please her master. She asked probingly, just because our fathers are different, we live such completely different lives. Do you feel wrong? Her biological mother was a commoner, someone who became a countess on her beauty alone. Natasha inherited her beauty and her background. She was well aware of her own weaknesses. When selecting a maid, her treatment for different answers was often extreme. Liana replied that she didn't feel that way. Perhaps the young lady doesn't understand. My life now is already very good. Letting my niece eat her fill and being able to sleep well together is what I've always hoped for. To compare myself with others and end up destroying the happiness I could have. I'm not willing to do that. Natasha was silent for a moment after hearing this. She asked if her niece just turned 8 last month. She said, "Starting tomorrow, come work in my room." When she returned, she found that, sure enough, at this hour, she wasn't asleep. Liana's niece, Phoebe Theodore, under the protagonist's urging, she had to go to sleep quickly. The book was an iteran, which she learned from what was being burned. It seems to be Lady Angelica's. She felt it was very simple. This is a big problem. Although she knew Phoebe was smart, if Lady Angelica found out, the consequences would be severe. Phoebe might be in danger. She had to make a promise with her niece not to speak of this, as it would arouse Angelica's jealousy. Phoebe agreed. Deborah ran up to the protagonist, teasing, "Isn't this the young lady's personal maid, Liana?" She wanted to say it for the 100th time. Happy, she didn't notice that the eldest daughter of the Baldwin family, Angelica, was already standing behind her. She came up and slapped her. "I guess it because you're a maid who serve a commoner? Your behavior is truly vulgar." It was the same for everyone there. No one could speak freely. Maids were like that. No one dared to make sound. Breaking the silence was a privilege only enjoyed by those of higher status. She looked at the protagonist. "You look decent enough. You were probably chosen to be a stand-in for that time, right? Since you both have the same background." She mocked the protagonist, but the protagonist said, "Neither servile nor overbearing, I don't think so. And now that I am her personal maid, I can tell Natasha what you've said." Angelica was furious when she heard that. She ordered her maid to bring out the whip she just bought. Just as Angelica was gloating, Natasha appeared behind her, saying, "Good morning, sister. I didn't think you would lay a hand on my maid," slapping her without any reason. Angelica was disdainful, looking down on and mocking Natasha as well. Natasha didn't back down, that "I'm very grateful to my mother. After all, we are very different in terms of spirit and intelligence." Natasha spoke to her in iteran. She really couldn't understand a single word. She didn't even know Natasha was cursing her. Unable to win the argument, she planned to just leave. The morning's little episode ended just like that. At Natasha's urging, Deborah had to leave early. In the royal garden, the task of serving the young lady fell to Liana. Liana's colleague, Annie, came over to praise her for being really amazing. Actually, at that time, it was the only thing I could do. When I was confronting Lady Angelica, Lady Natasha was observing the scene through the window. No matter how many times I was whipped, as long as I could make her recognize my loyalty, it would be a profitable deal. This act of showing loyalty was very important, because if I could be chosen as the young lady's dowry maid, I could at least create a condition for Phoebe to have her own room. Of course, I also wanted to avenge Deborah. She asked Annie, "Have you seen the prince?" Annie also had a starstruck look on her face. She said she had never seen him before. Seeing him for the first time today, he's so handsome. They're a really good match. If only His Highness the Crown Prince were a little more sincere. Ilad's gaze was fixed on the distance. Natasha noticed his inattentiveness. "Have you taken a liking to my maid?" He replied that he just wanted to praise her for putting her in such a beautiful dress. She didn't react much to his words. Looking at the flowers in the garden, my mother was very fond of that kind of flower. Purple is also the color of the emperor. He said, perhaps it's a more resilient flower. I originally thought the violet was a naive child, but I didn't expect her to show her claws. Not bad. It would be even better if they were sharper. It's a pity she'll have to be sent away after the work is done. Like I said, I don't care if others are jealous of me, and I'm not the type to be jealous of others. Except for that maid. We have other things to talk about. I plan to help you. After all, that is also very important to me. So bring me the evidence, and I will bring about the downfall of the Baldwin family, just as you wish. Meanwhile, the protagonist was looking at a map, a little lost. She had left her luggage in the carriage and got lost going back to find it. Next to her was the prince's maid. Just as she was about to ask for directions, the room door opened. It turned out to be the prince's bedchamber. Ilad suspected Natasha had sent her. The protagonist quickly explained that she was lost. Wanting to ask for directions, she didn't dare to look forward. This was truly too presumptuous. Seeing the protagonist's expression, he couldn't help but chuckle. He asked her to help him pick out some clothes. the clothes he would wear for dinner. What kind of clothes does your master like? The protagonist pointed to an outfit and said, the young lady likes more dignified clothes. Compared to flashy attire, she prefers men who look simple but dress smartly. He raised his hand, and the two of them inevitably touched. He asked her in return, what kind of clothes do you like on a man? She quickly pulled her hand back and said the same. I think this one would be just right, but he felt it might be a bit dull. After thinking for a moment, the protagonist decided to add an accessory for him. He looked at himself in the mirror, very satisfied with her. To his praise, the protagonist just responded politely, saying, it is my honor. As the protagonist turned to leave, he said regretfully, it would be nice if there was a maid like you in the palace. In the hallway, she recalled this incident. He asked me what kind of man I like. She couldn't help but start running, her face flushed and her heart pounding. Then she accidentally twisted her ankle and fell to the ground. She couldn't understand why she was so shy. It was just picking out an outfit. At that moment, someone extended a hand. It was a white-haired man. The two couldn't communicate. He was from the Atara kingdom and only knew a few words of their language. Seeing him concerned about her injury, the protagonist said it was nothing. He wanted to ask where his room was, but the protagonist misinterpreted it as him asking to go to her room. He just didn't know where his room was and wanted to ask for directions, but the protagonist didn't understand his meaning and rejected him directly. And she even felt this person was being strange. He was left there, helplessly wondering where his room was. The protagonist arrived at the library. It was the book Phoebe had read in Iterum before. There was no harm in confirming its contents. God was too lonely, so he created a being that could stay by his side. This was the first human, the Manish. God blessed him with omnipotence. He created countless humans for him. But the Manish, relying on God's omnipotence and favor, gradually became arrogant. The special power he possessed was called annihilation. With just a single word, no matter what it was, all traces of it would be erased from the world. The one who loved everyone. And no one, God's first human, the Manish, was perhaps too lonely. God created the Aradhana. Only by receiving her love could he understand God's blessing. The blessing once given to the Manish soon became a curse. His sharp senses made him scratch his whole body. The sound of talking, the sound of breathing could plunge him into agony. And the only person who could save him was the Aradhana. Only when in contact with her could he breathe properly. And so, the two of them got together. Everyone who saw this scene understood. The name of the final blessing God bestowed upon him was love, even for a legend told to children. This is a bit too cruel. A commotion was heard. She turned her head and saw someone. It was Lady Angelica and young Master Percival. She quietly hid. If she were discovered eavesdropping here, she would definitely be punished. She couldn't hear clearly what they were saying. It seemed to be something detrimental to Natasha. Today was Phoebe's birthday. The atmosphere was festive, but the protagonist had something on her mind, so her expression couldn't brighten up. Phoebe's parents really wanted the protagonist to live with them, but she couldn't settle down in this yet. She needed to save more money. It wasn't the right time. They were very good people, so she couldn't get them into trouble. Matthew secretly glanced at the protagonist. He said he also bought a gift. It was a small teddy bear. The protagonist was very grateful to Matthew. He gave Phoebe a birthday gift every year. From a distance, Deborah watched Matthew, thinking he looked overjoyed. She decided to tease him. She opened a gift prepared nearby and asked, "Whose box is this?" He was flustered. Just as he was about to admit it was for Liana, someone interjected, "Is this also a gift for Phoebe? It's a little dress. It looks very pretty." He stared blankly as Phoebe thanked him. Matthew, on the verge of tears, said, "As long as Phoebe is happy." Soon they went back. Phoebe was so sleepy, she fell asleep on the protagonist's back. Suddenly, Phoebe woke up. She said, "What I said at Annie's house wasn't true. The person I like the most is Aunt Liana." Hearing this, she said, "The person I like the most is Phoebe, too." In a flash, she fell asleep again. The protagonist felt helpless. The book about nobles that Phoebe read must have been a book the young lady threw away because she hated studying. I never thought the Baldwin family would come up with such a plan. Natasha should be running away from home soon. She will marry Benjamin, her father. Lady Natasha probably doesn't know anything yet. She had to think of a way to save the young lady. While working, Deborah said that His Highness the Prince had visited in person. It seemed the two had really fallen in love. But at dinner that day, he didn't wear the outfit the protagonist recommended. His Highness is truly an unpredictable person. She needed to find the gardener. It seemed she had to get a new set of floral decorations. It was Angelica. She had to be careful not to run into her today. The eldest young lady must be in a very bad mood. The protagonist originally wanted to pass by carefully, but Angelica didn't want to let her off. She was tripped and water splashed all over her face. Just like that, she mocked the protagonist and was about to step on her hand. Seeing her silent and humbly submissive, Angelica found it boring and left. The protagonist stood up, crying and laughing, thinking to herself, "It's okay. I just need to change my clothes. My hand was just stepped on." This ceramic is crystal ceramic. It is a rare product made with the theme of a night in the desert nation of Atara. Count Baldwin, Jack Baldwin, introduced it from the side. Illid had seen enough and wanted to leave. At that moment, Natasha came over. The two were like a couple deeply in love, greeting each other intimately. From behind, Natasha secretly handed him the evidence. After Illid sat down, he looked at the evidence and found it strange. Prohibited drugs smuggled from Atara, a route established by the house of Marquis Owen. Although this didn't seem like evidence of the Baldwins' downfall, the two had made a deal. The Baldwin family had signed an exclusive contract with a trading company run by the house of Marquis Owen. It could be considered evidence. The plan might have some hitches, but he would confirm it. This matter was finally settled. Just have to wait for this to be over. The maids doing laundry are very busy. The prince arrived early. It's too early to change the bedding now. He felt he should satisfy the maids' expectations. After all, they worked so hard and busily to prepare the bed. At this time, it was the protagonist's first time serving in such a situation, so she was very flustered. Should she help the young lady get ready first, or go to the bathroom to prepare the bathwater? Who knew the crown prince would be sitting right there and even greet her? I heard that they usually leave before the personal maid arrives. But now he actually hadn't left. He was waiting for his hands to be washed and for the protagonist to serve him. He casually asked if she had found her way later. The protagonist also said that she had found her way. Illid's expression suddenly changed. He said, "So the personal maid is also in charge of cleaning here. You should apologize right now." He waved his hand dismissively. She should just focus on taking good care of Natasha. The protagonist lowered her head, feeling very embarrassed and ashamed. Over here, Natasha felt speechless no matter how she thought about it, wrinkling the seat and spilling milk tea there. He was pretending they had already done something. She felt embarrassed for him. No, maybe this was better than being insulted. They didn't have to actually do anything. The protagonist hesitated for a long time before deciding to tell Natasha about this. She told her what she had heard in the library. She would marry Arnold. It was said that the Owen family was holding on tightly to the jewelry trade just to make this happen. And the point they had been suspicious about before turned out to be that they had sold her out. The protagonist said that if it were her, she would try to form a connection with the second son of the Owen family. She remembered his name was Benjamin. She knew this name from eavesdropping. However, she didn't know that the young master had sent her a love letter. She thought that on the premise that young Master Benjamin had feelings for the young lady, they could announce their relationship. The head of the Owen family would never let his son's lover be a concubine. Of course, this was just her opinion. The final decision belonged to the young lady. She actually thought this idea was not bad. Although she had already made a deal with His Highness, he could change his mind at any time. As expected, it would be a shame to send this maid away. Perhaps she had other uses. Natasha said that this month's salary was worth looking forward to. The protagonist was very happy when she heard this. Maybe she could move into the inn sooner. It was indeed the right thing to say. It wasn't for the money, but for Miss Natasha's sake. Just as the protagonist was about to walk and chat with her colleague, the young lady called her from the side, asking her to come and ride in the royal carriage together. Natasha's relationship with the two of them wasn't that close. She had to let everyone see that they weren't riding in the carriage alone. But for a maid to ride in a royal carriage, it was indeed too extravagant. After getting into the carriage, His Highness actually spoke to her. This made the protagonist very uncomfortable. She was afraid the young lady would scold her if she saw. Ilid, even in front of Natasha, asked her to work at the Imperial Palace. The protagonist really wanted to be invisible. In those two's eyes, she was just a maid playing along for their entertainment. They were discussing the ceremony for the anniversary of diplomatic relations. It was said that the Atara royal family would also be coming. He couldn't remember what the prince's name was. Besides, he was bad at remembering people's names anyway. Natasha teased, "You just can't remember men's names, right?" Ilid defended himself helplessly. "He's worked for you for 10 years, and you still haven't remembered his name clearly." Natasha made a bet with him using Liana's name. They would check in a month to see if he remembered. She bet that he wouldn't. The protagonist had no choice but to state her name. He was very happy. After hearing it, he said the name was easy to remember. After returning, the protagonist felt very uncomfortable. Afraid of making a mistake with her attire, she had specially worn a new pair of leather shoes, which ended up causing problems. She recalled Elide saying he would remember her name. It was common for people to forget a maid's name. There was no need at all. So from the beginning, she never expected him to remember. But maid must never forget her employer's name. Even hypothesizing about such a thing was absurd. It looked a bit ugly, but this was the only way. But it didn't matter. No one would pay attention to a maid's feet. While the girl was looking for the banquet hall, she ran into that person again. She thought to herself, this person is a pervert. It's better to have less contact with him. But the two still met, and he was so close. When she stepped back, her ankle couldn't take it, and she was about to fall again. Luckily, he caught her. The two looked at each other. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at her feet. The protagonist thanked him. If she had fallen in there, she would have been in big trouble. He always manages to help her. But the protagonist didn't know how to thank him. In the end, he said that when he grabbed her hand just now, it left a mark. Because of the language barrier, he wanted to say it wasn't on purpose, but it came out as if it was intentional. However, the protagonist understood what he meant. He spoke word by word, but luckily the protagonist understood. He was concerned about her injury. She told him not to worry. After a series of gestures from him, the protagonist thought he was saying he was an attendant of the Atar delegation. This made him very frustrated. The protagonist politely curtsied and greeted him, introducing herself. He also said his name, Arcelo, using his country's name as his surname. That was something only the imperial and royal families could do. But Phoebe had also said that the word order in the aristocratic language was different from the national language, so she didn't think much of it. Maybe it just meant he was from there. The protagonist also said his name, correcting his pronunciation. He looked at the protagonist, a little shy, as he said her name. Hearing him finally pronounce her name correctly, she was still very happy. It was getting late. She had to get to the banquet hall quickly. Just as the protagonist was about to leave, he grabbed her. He pointed to the person next to him and said attendant, but the protagonist still didn't understand what he meant, thinking he was saying he himself was an attendant. This made him very upset, and she really needed to leave. As she left, she even told him not to follow her. He just watched her leave like that. The attendant came over, thinking he was being called. Arcelo, the fourth prince of the kingdom of Atara, muttered her name to himself. Back at the banquet, her colleague reminded her not to forget to apply medicine. And over where the young lady was, there was a familiar face. It was said to be His Highness the Crown Prince. He had a completely different feel from the second prince. If His Highness the Crown Prince was the model of an imperial prince, then His Highness Elide was like a mischievous, playful angel. There was a feeling that His Highness the Crown Prince was being outshone. It was the young lady's call. She asked the protagonist to go to the carriage and get her scarf. Also, that person was Benjamin. She was to secretly pass this note to him. That was the young lady's future. She would definitely complete the task. There was a service staircase just around that corner. Although she was a little scared, suddenly a knife was stuck in the ground in front of her. Then she was tied up and brought to a place, questioned about where she heard it. This was clearly top secret. A few more people came from behind. He pulled out the small note from the protagonist. It was Marquis Arnold of the Owen family. He wanted to see the note. It was a love letter from Natasha to his son. He was furious. He had gone to great lengths to get that woman. And Lennox, His Highness the Crown Prince, was there too. Although she had no idea what was going on, one thing was certain. These men were engaged in an illegal act that must not be discovered. They actually ordered her to be executed, to die so easily. But she still had someone to protect. At the last second, the subordinate's sword stopped. It was His Highness the Second Prince. He knew his brother was here. Elide said he was stopping his brother from going astray. The way he glared at Elide, anyone else would have thought he was the one caught in the act of murder. He saw his lover's maid disappear into the darkness. He thought they were having a secret rendezvous. To be so concerned about his lover's maid, he really was a thoughtful and gentle lover. His own affair had been exposed, but he wasn't flustered at all. He was still making excuses for himself before leaving. He even reminded Elide that there are many enemies in dark places. He also had something to say. There are some people in this world who are not interested in status. Why be in such a hurry? The person in question has no interest at all. Then thank you very much, little brother. It's nothing, just a small matter. They didn't expect that while they were talking, His Highness the Prince would come. They almost messed things up. He wasn't sure if that kid knew or not. And what was that about not being interested in status? Arnold felt like he was going crazy. He looked like he was about to tear his brother to shreds. It was better to get away as soon as possible, as long as he could have Natasha. Elide untied the protagonist's bonds. The protagonist didn't know how to thank him, but Elide was concerned about her hand injury, saying it would leave a scar. The protagonist said nonchalantly that it was fine, as long as she could still use it. He noticed the wound on the protagonist's hand didn't look like it was from just now. The ball wasn't just a game for nobles. He suggested the protagonist should report this incident. It concerned her life. The protagonist said she understood. who knew he would find her note. The protagonist wanted to stop him. He could tell at a glance that it was written by the young lady. The Iteran language used on it must be for Benjamin. When he saw the note, he immediately understood everything that had happened. He told the protagonist to be a little more careful. He said all this with a smile on his face. He even said he was a very tolerant lover. His almost laissez-faire attitude greatly surprised the protagonist. Elide wiped the blood from her face and told her to go back and rest. Seeing his action, the protagonist quickly pushed him away, saying she hadn't finished her work yet. So now she just hoped he would tell her she could leave. Elide sighed helplessly and started to ask Tyrant, who was hiding in the shadows, if there were any other emergency stairs nearby. Elide's chief attendant, Siren Neville, came out and said he wasn't sure. He was always scared when His Highness acted so suddenly. Elide thought he was enjoying it. Siren was so angry he could retire. After a pause, he said, "The emergency staircase in the main hall is on the left wall, right in the center of the wall." After learning this, the protagonist thanked him and prepared to leave. She thought to herself that she should have worn her shoes properly. She was stumbling as she walked. Elide called out to her, reminding her to apply medicine when she got back. In that instant, the protagonist's heart fluttered. After returning, the protagonist instructed her niece that if she didn't come back, she should take the passbook and that bag to Aunt Deborah's place. And she must not tell anyone about their passbook, not even Alice. The niece promised. She was getting sleepy. Under the protagonist's comfort, she slowly fell asleep. For the protagonist, it was a great fortune to have returned alive. If she had died, she would never see her niece again. It was only natural that this hand was not pretty. She was a guardian raising a young niece. This scar was like proof of her hard work. She didn't feel ashamed at all. In fact, she felt very proud. But that time, she felt her hand was shabby. She seemed to understand why people believe in gods. The fear she felt at that moment, and the sense of security that came with the flow of blood. In that perfect, life-saving moment, a strong sense of faith surged forth. If His Highness the Prince hadn't arrived in time, she would have been dead for sure, without even a chance to pass on her last words. Even if he only saved her to stop his brother's illegal activities, at least she could continue to live her humble life. So she was still very grateful to him. She heard that His Highness the Second Prince was coming. This afternoon, Deborah hadn't told her, probably because she was busy and forgot. Her colleague told her to tidy up quickly too. After all, she was the young lady's personal maid. She had been too busy lately. She didn't even have a clean maid's uniform for the afternoon. There was one she hadn't had time to wipe the stain off of. There was no time. This was the only way. She asked to borrow a maid's uniform from Annie. It was already summer. Before she knew it, it was time for her break. Deborah only remembered to tell her at the last minute. During her break, she could only wander around here. She didn't know what was happening in the drawing room. Anyway, she was the only one who remembered what happened last night. His Highness was exactly the same as usual, although it wasn't like she hoped for any special relationship with him. It was the smell of cigars. Someone was smoking a cigar in a non-smoking area. She should remind them, but then she discovered it was Elide. The two exchanged polite greetings. The protagonist didn't know when he had sat down there. The protagonist had never felt the scent of flowers to be so strong, and her heart was beating very fast. Thinking about it, she decided it was better to leave. She had to go back and take care of the young lady. She would call an attendant for him. If he needed anything, he could just say so. Elide thought she was joking. He told her to come closer. He told her to turn around so he could tie her sash. He said pink suited her very well. After returning, the protagonist didn't know why he said that. It wasn't until she saw the zipper on her back that she understood. The ill-fitting dress had come loose where it was pinned, so he had seen it. Inside the tavern, a mysterious person ordered a glass of red rum. The waiter nodded and went inside. Natasha. Elide walked over and asked how things were going. Liana said that the Owen family had indeed signed a contract with the Baldwins and would likely fulfill it. In half a month, she would have to hold an engagement ceremony with Marquis Owen first. Thanks to pretending to be his lover, it seemed her value had increased quite a bit. The crazier he gets, the more he will covet things of the imperial family. Natasha reminded him not to make a mistake. The family she wanted to bring down was not Owen, but Baldwin. Drug smuggling is a serious crime. She could provide information in exchange for the release of the Baldwin family. Not only would their assets be confiscated, but they would also be sentenced to death. Her attitude was firm. She wanted the entire Baldwin family to fall. Thanks to the prince, the world had become much smoother, but she still had no way of knowing why he was helping her. At first glance, he seemed to be indulging in pleasure, but in reality, he was a man indifferent to others. She only hoped that His Highness, like herself, would be unable to get what he wanted. Knowing that he came with a maid, Elid wanted to invite him for a meal. Elid was refused. His family was about to collapse. He had an appointment with a banker planning to transfer his assets in advance. He told her to think about it. The book she asked Annie to buy was sold out. She saw a ribbon on the roadside and wanted to buy it for her niece. But she found that the price of the ribbon was 2 days' lodging at the Carter Inn. The protagonist turned and left, ignoring the shopkeeper's attempts to keep her there. The shopkeeper was even lowering the price to make her stay. Just as the protagonist was about to turn back and refuse him directly, she saw an acquaintance. It was Mr. Arcelo. The attendant frowned upon hearing this title. Because he was an attendant, he looked more dignified. Only then did the protagonist realize their identities were not simple. The protagonist quickly apologized. The two were whispering something to each other. The attendant changed his tune, saying he was a bit flustered seeing the attendant. She shouldn't mind. Hearing this, the girl couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. He was so fluent in the imperial language. He was about to say what he was doing with the fourth prince. But under the fourth prince's intimidating gaze, he changed his words to say he was carrying out the fourth prince's duties. It was only then that the protagonist had a sudden realization, thinking he was the fourth prince's attendant. He asked the protagonist to take Arcelo on a tour of the area. Before the young lady returned, she had a 2-hour break. She could take him on a tour of Cadogan. The latest trend in the Empire was food. The protagonist brought him here. Banana crepe. When he first saw it, he looked a bit displeased, but it tasted surprisingly good. The protagonist saw he had cream on his face and casually wiped it off for him. Thinking about how the protagonist would wipe his face, he fell into deep thought. Afterward, he began to gobble it down. The protagonist was shocked to see this. She took his hand, intending to lead him to the fountain over there to wash up. Arcelo looked at their joined hands, feeling very shy. The protagonist was introducing other flavors to him, like strawberry. From a distance, a familiar voice called out. It was Elid. A short while ago on the street, he was looking for the protagonist. He heard people around him discussing how handsome a foreigner up ahead was. Then he saw the scene before him. He saw the protagonist's happy expression. His face darkened, and the protagonist still didn't understand the situation. The two of them seemed to have reached some agreement, and now he had to accompany him on his shopping trip. The two of them said something, even pointing at her. Elid explained to him that as a prince, he couldn't just ignore an envoy, so he had to use formal speech. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in line with royal etiquette. Seeing the protagonist hesitate, he turned as if to go find Natasha. The protagonist was helpless. Since he had put it that way, what could she do? But for His Highness to be so nonchalant about that incident, did he not feel any guilt or remorse? The protagonist couldn't help but give him a sour look. Elid noticed her hands were covered in scars and offered to help the protagonist carry her books. The girl refused directly, saying the book was titled How to Become a Handsome Chef. In her heart, she was thinking, please don't ask. Arcelo said something, and Elid translated, saying he wanted to buy a Cadogan book as a souvenir. In that case, they should buy a fairy tale book with illustrations. The protagonist knew a lot about this. The protagonist went into the shop and began to explain that he wanted to buy a fairy tale book. Elid came over, asking for a book that was popular with maids. The clerk said, of course, it's romance novels. The most popular romance novels are all over there. He whispered that among them was the one the protagonist had just bought. A new series of The Chef in Bed had just come in. The protagonist couldn't stand it anymore, explaining that she bought it for a friend. But Elid clearly didn't believe her. Anyone could see the mocking expression on his face. The protagonist couldn't help but say that he was the one who should be ashamed of his behavior. But Elid said with an innocent face, I didn't do anything wrong. You're the one who brought a romance novel into the royal palace. The protagonist was very angry, reminding him of the incident where he saw her underwear. He thought for a moment before finally realizing which incident it was. He couldn't help but laugh out loud, apologizing to the protagonist in the middle of it. But he still didn't think it was a big deal that what's wrong with a red one. Arcelo looked at the cheerful atmosphere between the two. His expression wasn't too good. At this moment, the protagonist's time was up. It was time to return to the young lady. In the end, Arcelo actually caught up to her and apologized. It turned out he was specifically apologizing for lying to her. Hearing this, the protagonist couldn't help but laugh out loud. Actually, she had figured it out 2 hours ago. After all, He just stared blankly as the prince left. It's strange no matter how you think about it. Their attitudes were complete opposites. Besides, the prince's imperial language is so good. How could his attendant not know it? But she didn't mind his lie. After all, he had already apologized to her. Arkin began to formally introduce himself to her. He told her to call him Akai, allowing a maid to use his nickname. She thought it might be due to regional differences. She would call him Prince Arkin from now on. Was it because of that unreal smile? She felt like she now understood what kind of country the Atara kingdom was. Well then, until next time, on her way back, she was lost in thought. The first time Arkin saw her, he remembered her name, but she would bet that Elide had already forgotten it. After all, he didn't call her by her name on the way. He must have completely forgotten it. After all, she was just a maid. The flowers were indeed beautiful. She suddenly remembered Deborah asking her to tie up the back of her dress. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't notice anything unusual. Only the loose, sloppy bow that His Highness had tied. In fact, His Highness probably didn't see anything at all back then. She felt so embarrassed. She had actually misunderstood His Highness. And she even brought it up. The fact that she was so concerned about everything related to His Highness now clearly had only one reason. Unknowingly, she had fallen in love with His Highness. It started again. At the banquet, a lady was reminiscing about the past with Her Majesty the Empress, praising him for being like a Manish. Lennox came over, smiling as he interjected that his younger brother was like a Manish. Then, with a grim expression, he said that his brother was indeed very outstanding. The atmosphere of the banquet instantly froze. He had ruined the party's mood. It didn't look like he had any intention of leaving either. He might as well go outside. That was fine. It was a boring occasion anyway. His brother cared about everything. He, on the other hand, was content just being a Grand Duke of royal birth. Historically, every Manish who awakened also wore the crown. Without exception, they all achieved great accomplishments. So, no matter who the crown prince is, if a Manish appears, he must give up the throne. At his coming-of-age ceremony, it was proven that he was not the Manish. It's been 7 years since then. Even so, his brother is still wary. It was truly incomprehensible. Whether it was his brother's inflated desire for power, or the sense of inferiority his brother gave him. At that moment, he suddenly noticed someone there, dressed plainly. She was looking at the fish in the water. She suddenly turned her head and revealed a brilliant smile. He found it interesting. So this was a maid? Her level of seduction was quite unusual, but he wouldn't mind spending night. Who knew that a voice would come from above, calling the girl's name and telling her to wait. So she hadn't seen him, even though he was on a lower level. This was the first time he had ever felt completely ignored. And just like that, he remembered her name. He started to pretend he didn't care. In the end, looking at her expression, the way she got angry was actually kind of cute, because he didn't want to say Liana's name in front of that man. He went to great lengths. Anyway, he had seen everything underneath clearly. He didn't know it was pink. Quite interesting. I wonder if she's received the gift. It'll be about a month this time. She looked in surprise at the gift in her room. It had the imperial crest. It was a brooch, a gift from the royal family. There was also a letter. His Highness remembered her name. Both gifts were brooches. She felt quite giddy. Was it to keep the promise he made back then, that he sent a gift just because he said he would? Regardless, she planned to put it away and return it to him. After all, this gift was too precious, both in terms of money and sentiment. On the day of Natasha and Owen's engagement ceremony, the entire residence was especially busy. Everyone was gossiping. She knew that the young miss would not give up, but the note she gave to Benjamin ultimately failed. Since his visit that day, His Highness Elide had not come again. In any case, there was only one way to save the young miss now. Give the note to Benjamin. Maybe he could really save the young miss. Avoiding people's gazes, he came here. The man attending his ex-girlfriend's engagement ceremony. He had come here again. Let's stay here for a while according to the plan. He would possess her soon enough, just as he was about to have a smoke. A little girl poked her head out. She said this was a no-smoking area. She told him to go behind that building. When Phoebe heard he was a prince, there was nothing she could do. He took out a candy to eat. The girl, Phoebe, remembered her aunt's words, "Don't take candy from strangers." But she couldn't resist the temptation and ate it anyway. She had argued with Alice. Alice said that besides an aunt, she also had a mother. She couldn't help but start crying. But she wasn't envious at all. Her aunt was more beautiful and smarter than them. She was just sad that she couldn't insult someone else's mother, because that's what her aunt had taught her. Elide comforted her. Uncle also grew up with a nanny. Didn't I turn out all right? He felt that her hair color was very familiar. So he asked her if her aunt was pretty. Meanwhile, Liana's wrist was grabbed by Benjamin. He ignored her struggles and threats. He said he needed an outlet too. It It was only then that she realized he was unhinged. She tried to run but fell to the ground. There was no one outside who could help her. She didn't understand, just because she was a maid, was it okay to be treated like this? To be killed, to be trampled on. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass came from outside. Phoebe was calling for her aunt and for His Highness Elide. He kicked the man away with one foot. Phoebe hurried over to help her up. The butler came over, wanting to stabilize the situation, but was intimidated by the prince's glare. She didn't understand. Why did she always have to see him in such a state? He knew full well this was Natasha's maid, yet he still did this. He didn't want to marry a maid either, because that would be a disgrace to the nobility. Elide told him to behave. After all, his actions were ruining both of their lives. He thought to himself, objectively speaking, being a royal maid only required warming the bed. She wouldn't have to risk her life to complete those useless tasks. Once the Baldwin family fell, he could take her in, let her live a carefree life, displayed in his curio cabinet. In the end, Natasha's engagement ceremony was canceled because the knights burst in and arrested Benjamin as a criminal caught in the act of taking drugs. Because her fiancé's son had committed a serious crime, the ceremony, which was postponed, left behind only messy decorations. The maid spent a hectic time cleaning up the ceremony site and gossiping. But there was one exception. Phoebe was finally sleeping soundly. Thanks to everyone's help, she was able to get off work early to wash Phoebe up and soothe her spirits. She was really lucky. She had been terrified at the time. When she was in terrible danger, she kept hoping for his arrival, like a savior sent by the gods. She kept hoping he would come and save her, hoping the knight would defeat the villain for her. She gazed at his back with such longing. However, that was just a fairy tale. After all, he said he wouldn't want to marry a maid. In the fairy tale, she wasn't the princess, but the snake-like character who dared to seduce a noble. She planned to return the item to him. The inside of the wardrobe was a mess. There were signs of it being rummaged through. Her brooch was gone. The person who lost valuables wasn't just Liana. The maids reported the stolen items and their value. Only her losses were particularly high. Even some of her things that weren't valuable had also disappeared. It seemed like she was being deliberately targeted. Natasha called her name several times. Only then did she come to her senses. The young miss seemed to understand her. With so much having happened, maybe she, like her mother, could become a marchioness. She noticed the female lead's expression was off and said she was just joking. His Highness Elide would be visiting in the afternoon. She told her to put a little more effort into her appearance. Deborah's expression was a bit indignant. When the two were on a break, Deborah took something out. Annie told her to eat it. To prevent her from saving all for Phoebe, she stuffed it directly into her mouth. She thought for a moment, then said her brother would be delivering ingredients in the afternoon. She told her to consider her brother. Actually, through this matter, she had no intention of forcing her. She just wanted someone who could protect her. It would be fine even if that person was someone else. She was actually very worried about her. After all, she was very beautiful. If she could be with her brother, she would have to worry less whether it was about Phoebe or about her. That's why she said it. In fact, at that time, she clearly could have hinted that it wasn't Liana's fault at all. But she didn't say it. But she just smiled and told her she was fine. Deborah cried for a long time, then ran inside, saying she would do her share of the work too. And she, taking over Deborah's work, met Matthew, who came to make a delivery. Although Matthew was the same as usual. He had bought something for Deborah and also bought something for her and Phoebe on the side. But the gift he gave her, in particular, was of surprisingly good quality. How should she respond to Matthew's feelings? Meanwhile, Natasha was questioning him about what on earth he was doing. Because of his interference, things had become a mess. Elide's expression was very calm. He told her not to go crazy here. Sit down first. Natasha noticed his gaze had become sharp. For the sake of the plan, she had to endure it. What happened this morning was because the plan went off track. She only lost her temper because she was upset. She considered whether to take her with her when the time came. She was actually a little curious too. After all, the human heart is hard to predict. What if she thought that path was happiness? But these were all just clumsy excuses. She probably just wanted to hurt that maid. Or perhaps hurt herself. Elide knew she wanted to take the maid. He gave a perfunctory reply that she should do so. His eyes looked elsewhere. It was the sight of her in Matthew. Even though he had already warned him, it seemed he still didn't get it. He said, "This black tea should be brewed as strong as possible." Another mistake. "So, could you call my maid for me?" At this, she came over. She thought to herself to pretend she didn't see anything and just do her job. He then turned and brought up the matter of the accessory he gave her. Why wasn't she wearing the brooch he gave her? She was about to break out in a cold sweat. When the young miss asked, she could only admit the truth. She explained that she had helped His Highness with a small matter before, and he gave it to her as a reward. But she felt it was too valuable for a maid, so she didn't think of wearing it out. The young miss told her not to be so reluctant and to just wear it. She really wanted to say it was too valuable and that he shouldn't send anymore. But what she said was that she wanted to save it so she could sell it later. She had a niece, so it was understandable. Elide took her hand and said, "As a maid, you should be able to tell the difference between dirty and plain, right?" She felt a little flustered. It was a stain she got while comforting Deborah. She felt very embarrassed and pulled her hand back. Elide said he would send her more in the future, and he told her to wear the jewelry. After all, her residence didn't restrict her. She said yes. Then she went out. Natasha looked at her speechlessly. She emphasized to him that Liana was her maid, who knew that Elide would suddenly get up and deliberately move closer to her. It made her feel completely baffled. Natasha came over at this moment. She said she was just there to get the tray. Blushing, she apologized and left. Natasha immediately saw what was going on. A man who would not give up his reputation for a woman and who didn't think it was necessary. And a maid who was firmly entangled in this man's trap. How interesting. At this moment, she was full of regret. If she hadn't gone in, she wouldn't have encountered that scene. How ridiculous. Compared to that time, she felt even more heartbroken today. As ridiculous as someone who believed that only His Highness Elide would not hurt her, who held that kind of blind trust. Suddenly, Phoebe's voice came from downstairs. Lady Angelica had found the book. She hurried over and asked her why she wasn't staying in her room. Lady Angelica said she was a book thief. She looked at her sternly. Angelica said Phoebe stole her book. It was the book she had picked up at the incinerator. Phoebe was also indignant. She had clearly picked it up, so how could it be considered stealing? And she could even speak that language loudly. Lady Angelica told her to apologize. This provoked the young lady even more. She went straight up to slap her, but she stood in front of the child. She had to protect Phoebe. She bowed her head and apologized to her. This was the only way to protect her. The young lady's vicious words did not lessen because of her show of weakness. Her insults became uglier and uglier. She even said the child was learning the language to seduce men and become a plaything. She angrily called out, "Young Mississippi." She said, "You must be very disappointed. After all, you know so much about gentlemen's preferences, yet you can't find an opportunity to use it." The passionate love letter the young miss wrote to Viscount Thompson has been circulating among the servants. In their eyes, maids and attendants might just be furniture without thoughts, but they are people with minds and ears. Viscount Thompson threw the letter in the trash, and there was more than one such letter. After saying her piece, she ignored the fuming young lady and left, leading her niece away. To her, Phoebe was her purpose in life, so from now on, they would have to live in an inn. Phoebe didn't care where they lived, as long as she was with her aunt. Although she was a maid who knew her place, she didn't want to grovel and let people hurt her only niece. At that moment, the royal knights entered. On suspicion of drug, smuggling, and being a habitual drug user, they were placing the young lady under emergency arrest. She and her little niece were stunned, not understanding what was happening. Deborah brought her upstairs. Count Jack Baldwin and his family were all being placed under emergency arrest for assisting in drug smuggling. Count Baldwin was still trying to argue. Just then, she found it strange. They said the whole family was to be arrested, but only the young miss was not there. She hadn't expected the prince to be here as well. Amidst everyone's welcome, he slowly descended the stairs. He also brought today's main character, Natasha. The Count desperately told his daughter that he didn't do such things. Natasha smiled and asked if he remembered this dress. It was the dress her mother wore when she committed suicide. The Count said her mother had a mental illness and asked if there was some misunderstanding. She was the youngest daughter of the family. Natasha smiled and said to him, "You still don't get it? I'm avenging my mother." From a moment she found her mother's diary. She knew he was a man who would sacrifice his own wife to strengthen the family. And she, to achieve her goal, had approached an innocent, unsuspecting maid. The young lady angrily asked if she was trying to repay kindness with enmity. She laughed and said she didn't want to be one anymore. Now you'll become a lowly commoner. Sister can stay in prison. Natasha's revenge came to a close. The royal knight then walked up to her and told her she was under arrest as a criminal. Natasha was a little surprised. She was being arrested for tax evasion and the use of borrowed name accounts. It bore the royal seal. Natasha hadn't expected to be double-crossed. could have been from that time when he said, "Call my maid." There was only one condition to the contract, and there was only one illegal act he would turn a blind eye to. He had also found out about the alternative plan Natasha had prepared for him. With a cold expression, Natasha watched him get into the carriage. She said, "Your Highness will regret this. You two will have a moment of weakness." The prince nonchalantly said, "Who knows? Will that day ever come?" Winter arrived. She and Deborah were together, not knowing how they would live from now on. Now, anything could be done to her. Deborah was even thinking she should have stolen some jewels. But she said no. She wanted to take a look at the young Mrs. room. All the valuables in the dressing room were gone. The Count had never touched the young Mrs. clothing allowance. All that money added up was probably enough to live on for a lifetime. The ones who should be most worried were them, especially her. Without a letter of introduction, she might have to start as a dishwasher. Someone came to the inn. She went forward to greet them. She never expected it to be Prince Arkan. He was discussing something with someone else. Deborah asked who he was. She said he was someone she met by chance. Deborah started putting on makeup, saying she should have said so earlier. But it was understandable that she didn't like her brother. Now she wanted the one with brown hair. The one with white hair was for her. Deborah went right up and started chatting. Seeing that Akai was also looking at her, she simply greeted him. At that moment, Deborah shouted loudly that the food was ready. The two of them ate it and felt it was so spicy. The attendant seriously suspected this was an assassination attempt. Phoebe poked her head out from under the table. She asked if he was really a prince. She was speaking the Atara language, and she was self-taught. Arkan praised her, saying she was really amazing. She said her aunt said so too. That was her aunt over there, the most beautiful person in the world. Arkan agreed and asked the girl's name. He wanted to ask a favor of her. Arkan asked to meet her alone. He took out a prepared note. He wanted to say what was on his mind. She asked him to slow down so she could understand the situation. He understood. Arkan wanted to take her to the royal city of Idara. He could offer her a position there. She roughly understood. He wanted her to become a lady-in-waiting at the royal palace. She asked why Arkan said she was very capable, because at that time, she always used the young lady as an excuse. By then, she was a little confused. How did he know her niece and find this place? Arkan started to play dumb. She didn't want a job that required her to hide her identity, and it was to such a faraway place. Moreover, she didn't understand why he insisted on taking her. Arkan said there was no one like her there, so he sincerely wanted to invite her. She went back and told Deborah about this. She needed a week to think it over. She also had to consider Phoebe's opinion. Deborah asked her to find out only one thing, whether she could bring her along too. She agreed, but she still had to consider whether to go or not. And the reason she was chosen was because she was capable. Deborah was a bit speechless after hearing that. The prince resolved to do his best for Liana. In the palace, Elid planned to, that maid, bring her into the palace. The attendant felt it would be better to make her a mistress, but he was worried that after he grew tired of her, she would pester him for marriage. His current situation wasn't very good. He would be gossiped about by the nobles, but he still wanted to do it. Moreover, he felt that since he was giving her such a job, she would definitely agree. Seelan heard this and was a bit angry. The prince hadn't at all considered things from her perspective. But the prince didn't listen to his words at all. Now, he was going to sleep. He preferred to sleep naked. Although he was very dissatisfied, he was to send someone to the maid's place tomorrow and have them report back. The prince was also thinking of going personally to make her recognize her place. He thought to himself that he was determined to have her. Seelan and Prince Elid were childhood friends. His mother was the wet nurse who raised the prince. He had also taken care of him for over 20 years, from when he learned to walk to entering the academy and up until now. Elid was a decent employer and a good friend, but he easily overlooked others' feelings. Even when he analyzed others' emotions with his mind, it was only to use them. His excessive perfection stemmed from cold indifference. Now, he was playing clever tricks even with the girl he liked. He understood that if this continued, His Highness would never be able to understand his own true feelings. He could only do his best to help. That night, he felt a great pain in his body. His mind was racing. He rang the bell forcefully. Seelan ran in. Seeing that His Highness was not himself, he called for a doctor. His Highness kept muttering, "Run." The Maneth had awakened. The seventh Maneth's power was fire. In a massive, flickering explosion, countless people were buried in the sea of flames. Your Majesty must make a decision now. Personal feelings are a ruler's greatest enemy, Lennox said, adding that it was indeed a cause for concern. Although it's necessary to dispose of a Maneth who has lost their Aradna before they go berserk. But that was his son. Familial bonds are hard to sever. He, too, didn't want to send his younger brother away just like that. But he was the one who taught him that as royalty, one must fulfill their royal duties. The emperor was in a difficult position. The reason for the irregular cycle of the Manhwa's appearance, there is only one: the absence of an Aradhana. If a Manhwa appears, the divine valley of Idra will also appear, a divine oracle that announces the existence of an Aradhana. But that oracle has not yet appeared. Most Manhwa who don't have or can't find an Aradhana will die within 5 days. By then, if they find one and are rejected, it's also possible, just like with his younger brother. For the sake of safety, Lennox suggested sacrificing his younger brother. In the end, the emperor decided to lock the Manhwa up, to build a prison in the Selena Mountains, and set up a divine barrier for protection. Lennox was very pleased when he heard this. At this time, a report came in, a message from Idra. It was actually the divine oracle, and it was about her. She planned to go to Timur village. A passerby who overheard was worried, as a plague had occurred there. She said she wasn't concerned. She had to go there before going to Idra. Deborah also agreed to go with her. They gave assurances about the royal city of Idra. This would be very helpful for Phoebe's education. Phoebe also wanted to go. No matter what she wanted to learn, she would send her to learn it. Raise her well. Even if it meant leaving this country for Idra, she probably wouldn't see him again, right? But that was fine too. She would be free from her past longing. These two wretched girls, they don't even know how to repay the kindness of being raised. Where'd they run off to? Someone discovered them. She was on high alert. But the auntie was very kind. She gave them food. She also introduced them to her family. Her older sister and Jane often argued, but through their bickering, the two became husband and wife for life. They were very happy and even had a lovely daughter. The family was very happy, but misfortune struck, leaving only her with Phoebe. She left the village with her. Their life was very hard. Passers-by would speak ill of them. Suddenly, she woke up. It was a dream about when she first came to the Empire and was begging blindly. Luckily, an auntie discovered them. Only the Carter family, who knew nothing, took them in, and so she gradually began to hide her secret. She didn't want others to know she was from Timura. Her existence might cause them to catch the infectious disease too. She had no choice. It wasn't just to survive. It was because Phoebe was gravely ill. She thought about how lucky she was that nothing happened back then. She came to her sister's grave and recounted the events of the past years. She was leaving now. Maybe she would bring her husband over later. She had fallen for a handsome man, but this also caused her great pain. But now she had given up. Now she was leaving. Who would have known that at this moment, the royal knights would actually show up? After asking her identity, they took her away directly, saying she was the one who could soothe His Highness. She didn't know what had happened to His Highness for the past 3 days. Lennox was very happy seeing his current state. The damage he caused, as his older brother, he had already taken care of it. And the attendant who had been by his side since childhood, Seelan, was already dead. The maids in his palace were also dead. When Lennox ascended the throne, he thought he had won. He had gained the world's recognition. But the things he had worked so hard to obtain were just a joke in his eyes. He had been robbed of recognition and all attention by a guy who was about to die like this. Now he would crush his last hope. He mocked him for being unable to find his Aradhana. Those who once held him in high regard were now trying hard to escape. That must be an interesting scene. 2 days before Elid's death, many girls were dragged in to be checked if they were the Aradhana. If they failed, they would be burned alive. When it was Netta's turn, she was very smug. She had previously boasted that she would not fall into the abyss. Now he's pathetic enough. She doesn't need to do anything. Just a touch and his arm rots away. How can he live like this? Living with a monster like him. Only 1 day left. The line is still very long. She was also brought over. Archon rushed over, telling her not to go. His attendant was also there, tried to negotiate if they could take her away. She didn't know why he was here, but she was sure she had to go. This was her destiny. She had to see it with her own eyes. Archon was very worried. He wanted to beg her not to leave. He could finally escape from this terrible situation. His perfect world had shattered. The pampered second prince was no more. Just as his older brother said, the Manhwa is a being of legend. Only those who survive the smell of burnt flesh would have such an opinion of him. No matter which young lady it was, in this sea of flames, all of them would become a pile of ash. He even burned his own confidant to death. This was all his doing. He didn't understand what right he had to live. After the last one was finished, he would be pushed off a cliff. Only then could he be free, until he saw Liana. The sorrow he thought had gone numb surged in his heart once more. He didn't want her to see his current ugly state. He would respectfully, his hand reached out. Although he had wanted to give up, now he wanted to live. A huge burst of light erupted from the mountaintop. His body was returning to its original state. Seeing Liana about to fall, he supported her. Everything was quiet, so she was his one and only. The feeling of longing surged endlessly. His eternal master. The only god who could calm him was her alone. The unemployed maid, Liana. Next was the Empress's appointment ceremony. She became the one and only Empress of the Cadogan Empire. Wearing the Emperor's insignia, his fingertips trembled slightly. For a moment, Liana couldn't help but feel a sense of kinship. She would never forget that moment for the rest of her life. Suddenly lost in thought about becoming the Empress, she almost forgot she was bathing. Now she was actually going to marry the person she was determined to forget and spend their first night together. In such a chaotic situation, she was still here, secretly excited. The two sat in silence. She was still worried that he wouldn't like her. The two of them kept drinking. Soon, she was drunk. She asked if he hated having her as his empress. He lowered his head and said, "Neither of us had a choice. What's the point of asking such questions?" She accidentally knocked over her wine glass. Elid sighed softly. He really did desire her now. Then he started kissing Liana. He kept saying her name. This night was exceptionally long. She actually had many more things she wanted to say to him, but it wasn't important now. Just being with him made her happy. After it was over, Elid got up and left. When she woke up the next day, she found His Highness was already gone. Brenda, the head lady-in-waiting of the Empress's palace, was there to help her wash up. She wanted to open the curtains. But right now, her body was covered in marks left by His Majesty. She wanted to wash by herself. Thankfully, she was allowed to bathe alone. She couldn't let the maids see her like this. He must have been very restrained when he touched her. But the headboard was still broken. Thinking about last night, she was still too embarrassed. After washing up, His Majesty had prepared tea for her. He had also made arrangements for her niece. She should probably go thank him later. Now she was all alone in such a large room. But she wasn't alone anymore. She thought that since she was the Empress, she should fulfill her duties. She was ready, but she was told she didn't need to do anything. She just needed to rest well. His Majesty the Emperor did not wish for her to be burdened with anything. She roughly understood the hidden meaning. They had no intention of accepting a maid like her as the Empress. Could it be that His Majesty also didn't acknowledge her as the Empress? Perhaps he was forced to appoint a person of humble birth as Empress. If that was really the case, she didn't know what she should do. She felt so wronged. Meanwhile, Elid felt something was strange. He could erase the memories of the other Aradna candidates, but not the Empresses. The attendant said that the Aradna is a special existence. She would remember everything that happened at that time. The minister mentioned the budget proposal for the temple. He said that a temple that couldn't even grant the knowledge he sought didn't need such a large budget. Then he left. He turned his head, about to call for Seelan, but the person by his side was long dead. The attendant reported. The lady-in-waiting had personally seen the Empress drink the tea and would prepare it daily. He actually knew that even in the dead of night, the marks on her body were very deep. This time, he had become a monster too. A terrifying monster that would only leave her with pain. The Empress clearly had a tense expression. In contrast, during the coronation ceremony, he was already planning that night. He had hurt her like this. He was worried about Liana. And because of this, he wouldn't stay by her side. Voices echoed in his ears. They said that Liana didn't want to be with him at all, because he was a monster. In the end, he would live according to the instincts of a Manith. He would have to kill his Aradna. And if he didn't control his emotions, flames would ignite around him. He was very worried that Liana would come to loathe him. But so what? Liana had to accept him, and his self-esteem was already in tatters. He decided to act the part of his old self. That way, maybe she wouldn't be afraid of him. She would see him as a person, even if she saw him as a selfish and cowardly beast. He had to act as if nothing was wrong, stand before her, and protect his own pride. He found Liana reading a book, but the book on the fundamentals of palace etiquette was a bit too difficult for her. She was also very grateful to him for the matter concerning her niece. After all, she was her only blood relative. For Liana, the object of her emotional attachment is her blood relative. This was something he didn't have. A terrifying thought emerged in his mind. He actually wanted her niece to disappear, but she must never know this. Liana noticed his expression was off. She asked with some concern what was wrong. Seeing her, Elid felt a sense of relief. After all, the person who could stop him from going berserk was right by his side. Liana kept saying something. They were all words of concern for him. This made Elid very happy. He couldn't help but laugh out loud, saying he was fine, just a little tired from handling state affairs. Then he walked closer to Liana and asked her if she was okay yesterday. It didn't really hurt, did it? He wanted to take a look. This made her very embarrassed. What is His Majesty trying to do? Elid just asked if she needed treatment. It was better for him to look than for another doctor, right? Soon they were finished. Liana wanted to stay with him a little longer, but but he had to go. He was silent for a moment. He said that he already knew about what she had asked the head lady-in-waiting. She didn't have to do anything here. Just like now, she didn't have to do anything. He would call for a tailor tomorrow. He asked if there was anything she wanted. She shook her head. He became a little angry when he saw that. He asked with slight irritation if she didn't want to accept his things. She was a little scared when she saw this. The atmosphere became tense. He left. Actually, what she really wanted was for His Majesty to be by her side. But His Majesty didn't want to stand side by side with her, but just wanted her to be an empty shell. The legends of the Manhwa and Aradhana were all fake. Even after stepping into real life, to still believe in fairy tales, how ridiculous she was. It seems the power regulation is going smoothly. He's in a very good mood. He's also very focused on his work. He'll probably handle any proposal cheerfully. So he handed over the official document regarding next week's nightly order inspection ceremony. As expected, it was a success. The Emperor even asked for his name. He replied that his name was Jobber Parker. His Majesty suddenly asking about his family made him feel flustered. The Viscount Parker family should be in the silk-related business. He was to present the highest quality silk to the Empress. This should not be counted in the Empress's palace budget. Put it on his personal account. He was going to the library now, leaving right away. A list fell out from the documents. It was the participation list for the Empress's nightly order. One name had been crossed out. They had prepared some things that would suit Her Majesty the Empress very well. Her mood was low. She didn't want to look at these things. She only breathed a sigh of relief after the items and people had left. In the end, she didn't choose anything. The ornate and awkward feeling only made her more depressed. Now she was unclear about His Majesty's intentions and her own feelings. Even with the change in appearance, a maid was still a maid in the end. She missed her friends. She wondered if the Carter family was all healthy. She missed Liana a lot too. At that moment, a maid said a guest had arrived. It was Phoebe. She was so happy. They finally met. She missed Phoebe so much. Now she would never be separated from Phoebe again. This room was huge. They could sleep together. There were also many books she liked. Phoebe was also very happy. It would be great to be with her aunt. Phoebe was already imagining herself going to school, going to the library, and doing many interesting things. She also took the exam for the best school in the Empire. The wet nurse, Annie, who graded her, even said she would definitely pass. She was very happy for her when she heard that. That was a very good place. The academy was a place only very smart people could enter. If she went there, Phoebe could learn whatever she wanted to her heart's content. Most importantly, the limitations on her future would be greatly reduced. She wouldn't have to live on an empty stomach like before, nor would she have to pick up books that others had thrown away to read. By becoming the Empress, she could give Phoebe a happy life. Elide brought a notebook over, saying this one was easier. This book is case-based, so it's not as difficult to understand. The vocabulary isn't overly complex either. It's much better than those thick theory books. The female lead was very happy to receive it, because His Majesty had been considerate of her. She felt a little embarrassed when she saw it. The female lead was very grateful to him, because he had also gotten Phoebe into the academy. Eyelid said it was all due to her own efforts, as the selection there was very strict. His niece was indeed very strict, perhaps taking after him. When Phoebe arrived, all of her chaotic feelings were calmed. As a maid, there were some things she could never give to Phoebe. She just needed to give up a part of her pride. All of it could be cast aside. Even if she could only gaze at His Majesty's back, her grandfather would be very happy. She heard from the exclusive wet nurse that he was piling up books from the library to read. The female lead was a bit embarrassed. She had been studying too. It was just that her desk was a bit messy. As she silently thought about tidying up, the Emperor noticed the bruise on her hand had disappeared. She had applied ointment and taken medicine, and it had indeed gotten much better. He smiled, saying it was a pity he didn't get to witness it himself. Today, he would just give her a kiss before leaving. Whether it would be as simple as just a kiss would depend on her performance. The two slowly moved closer and kissed. Outside, it was full of noise. Phoebe wondered why it was so busy. The female lead said that today was the day of the banquet. Speaking of which, was it okay for them to read the etiquette book together? Phoebe agreed. But the etiquette book contained descriptions of married couples, which the female lead quickly pulled away. Then she began to change the subject by bringing out dessert. She was relieved at her quick thinking. She still remembered that Phoebe wanted to learn the Itala language. The female lead assured her that Phoebe didn't need to worry about those things. She could do whatever she wanted. At night, when she was alone, she hadn't expected Phoebe to remember what happened back then so clearly. At the time, she thought it was the best choice, but it had caused her great emotional trauma. She wanted to go out to meet Phoebe and talk, but she didn't expect the door to be locked. A maid came over and said she could just give her any orders directly. It was a recent change in regulations for the royal family to lock the bedroom doors at night for security reasons. She was locked in this room, a door that could be easily opened from the outside but not from the inside. She suspected His Majesty had ordered her to be confined, afraid she would cause the royal family to lose face because she was a queen who came from a maid's background. His Majesty finished the banquet. Although with Aradna's help, his condition had stabilized. But even so, a Manish is different from ordinary humans. Through their 5 senses, which are abnormally more sensitive than humans, he could sense their pretentious, utterly foolish, and disgusting true nature. Right now, he needed Liana. He heard from a maid that she wanted to go out. He was terrified that Liana would run away, the one he so desperately craved. He walked in with a smile. She looked very unhappy. He looked at the newspaper in her hand. He understood that she wanted to go to the banquet, but he didn't understand why. The people there were clearly disgusting. Besides, Liana could still avoid him. He turned his head and said he felt like he was already showing signs of losing control. Liana, as expected, turned her head. He would absolutely not let the person before him escape his side. He said, "Don't let your imagination run wild. There's no one there you'd get along with. Just stay with me." The next day, while she was spacing out, Phoebe came over. She said that on such a nice day, they should go on an outing. If her aunt didn't have to work today, it would be great if they could go to the library together. A change of scenery and going out to play with her should be nice. She said they were going to the library, but was stopped by a maid who said they had to report first. The female lead knew she was lying. The head maid was trying to control her. Although it wouldn't matter if she were alone, today was different. She had to take her niece with her. The female lead clearly stated the basic regulations, which made the head maid feel embarrassed. She smiled and threatened, right? Then she was able to enter. The matter was finally resolved smoothly. Luckily, she had secretly learned Miss Natasha's methods. She would pull the door handle every night, but the door never budged. Fully armed knights always stood guard in front of the door. For now, he just wanted to lock her in the Queen's palace. She wasn't unable to understand His Majesty's intentions. The Emperor's authority begins with the royal court's attendance. Within the royal household, which should be the most well-managed place, they couldn't have a queen of a maid's origin running around freely. If that happened, the attendants would naturally develop a dislike for the queen. Their feelings for the queen would soon be transferred to the emperor. But understanding and accepting are 2 completely different things. It's even more unacceptable when you have someone you need to protect. Phoebe reminded her to look at the bird eggs in the tree. She hoped it wasn't a cuckoo's nest. Cuckoos will push out the original baby birds, pretend to be the mother bird's child, and bully her. Phoebe was growing up day by day. She should also summon her courage and be her solid support. That night, she told the emperor her request. The knowledge from books was limited. She wanted to find a teacher to study with. Islet asked why. She said she wanted to become a respectable person. Although it would be difficult, she would have to attend official events one day. At least when she stood by His Majesty's side, she wanted to be someone who wouldn't be an embarrassment, to live like a queen. Although she couldn't change her birth, she could change her every move. His Majesty looked at her expression, somewhat stunned. She had that same expression back then. He sighed, saying he would find a suitable candidate for her tomorrow. The female lead was very happy that His Highness gave her this chance. She would definitely do her best. His Majesty looked at the mural in the hallway, thinking about her words and the smile on her face. He understood that what Liana really meant was, if permitted, she wanted to live like a queen. But he could understand, because she was the type of person who becomes strong when she has someone to protect. This was actually better. If Liana had something she needed from him, she wouldn't leave him. So it was a good thing. Your Majesty, this is the document regarding the budget adjustment for the Atella Temple. I heard Her Majesty the Queen has finished all her tea. Also, the doorknob wasn't turned yesterday. Although I know this isn't my place to say, can Her Majesty the Queen be released from confinement now? Restricting the freedom of Her Majesty the Queen, the mistress of the rear palace, risks disrupting the order of the entire rear palace. As he spoke, he felt his forehead grow a little hot. His Majesty changed the subject and asked about the etiquette teacher. It's been decided on Carolina. Also, this is a letter written by the former emperor. Because he is currently recuperating at the villa with Prince Lennox, there are rumors that he might return after a full rest. It's just empty talk. There's no need to report this. His recuperation was just an excuse in the first place. The former Emperor Magnus suddenly abdicated the throne to Islet. Lennox, who had long held the position of crown prince, also suddenly withdrew from the line of succession. But there are still many noble factions that follow them. This is enough to pose a threat to the current imperial power. Jobber was very curious about what was written. His Majesty just said it directly. The letter said to be wary of the queen. Her scent reeks of a foul stench. Her touch becomes a wound, and all blessings become curses. Only one person, only Aradna, can save him. The Manish once said to his god, "Aradna, stay by my side forever." But Aradna replied, "Why should I stay?" At that moment, the Manish understood. Without Aradna, he could not exist at all. But Aradna was someone who could find a replacement for himself. Thereafter, the Manish began to imprison Aradna so that he would not escape and so that he himself would not die. But Aradna was also a human created by God. He had to seek his own freedom. And so, the first Aradna ended his life in front of the Manish. The first Manish's special ability was annihilation. Just like that, a kingdom vanished from the map. After reading this, he was even more determined to keep a close watch on the queen, to keep her firmly confined. The etiquette teacher, the Countess. She heard that time was short and the schedule was tight. Because her niece was going to the academy this fall, she would also be making her debut in high society soon. The Countess said she would do her best. After several consecutive lessons, a month into her classes, Liana had reached her limit. The social season would end before the harsh winter arrived. She had to make her debut in society before then. In order to adapt better to the academy, she had to become a qualified guardian for Phoebe. She could definitely do it. When she woke up again, she found that the books were flying. It turned out His Majesty had arrived. She got up in a panic, explaining that she was like this because of her exams. His Majesty told her to rest well and take fewer classes. He told Liana to take a break tomorrow, having already requested leave for her. This night was destined to be another sleepless one. The final test for dining etiquette. She finally passed. She was very happy. Then, to commemorate passing the test, she could invite one person to dinner, because after all the practice, it must ultimately be put into practice. The Countess suggested she could invite His Majesty. After all, they were husband and wife. The female lead hesitated, but decided to try inviting him. She didn't notice the unfriendly expression on the Countess's face behind her. His Majesty, who was working, received a letter. An invitation to have dinner together. He went out immediately because it was an invitation from Liana. His Majesty agreed. She was also very happy. She started to get excited, not knowing what to wear. The maid beside her showed a helpless smile. His Majesty was already waiting at the dining table. The female lead came out, meticulously dressed. His Majesty saw her and said with a smile that he didn't know. He thought she was going to a battlefield. She was actually a little nervous. His Majesty told her to relax. The two chatted intermittently. His Majesty said that on the day the State Council meeting is held, she should bring Phoebe to the main palace. She could greet the Academy's headmaster. His Majesty also told her not to thank him so casually, as it no longer suited her status. Right now, they looked like a normal couple having a conversation. Everything was going so well, but then His Majesty suddenly said he would choose the next etiquette teacher. The female lead was shocked. His Majesty said she was a terrible teacher and he was going to fire her. The mistake was tonight's dinner. Her debut in high society would be postponed until next year. If this was the kind of etiquette she displayed at a formal dinner, she would not get what she wanted. He left the table early. She didn't know what she did wrong. His Majesty said the Countess should have already received her due punishment. The female lead turned back and asked, "Punishment?" The Queen's honor is also directly related to him. He will not tolerate anyone who damages his prestige. His punishment is perfectly normal. The female lead asked him to spare the Countess, saying it was all her fault, her own inadequacy. Mrs. Somerset's only crime was having to be the teacher for a lowborn queen. "Thank you for the dinner." His Majesty ordered everyone out. He raged alone in the room. He knew that woman had instigated it, because it was impossible for Liana to behave like that on her own. From start to finish, her etiquette was all wrong. If it were only one or two mistakes, he might have thought she was just not used to it yet. But all of Liana's subsequent actions were the opposite of basic etiquette. His queen had studied so diligently. It was impossible for her to make mistakes starting from the basic etiquette. The Countess had deliberately taught her the opposite actions. The purpose was to mock Liana, and Liana had happily praised her, looking so happy. He tried so hard not to hurt her, even letting her choose the etiquette teacher herself. But Liana misunderstood him and was enduring him for the sake of power. Would she run away from his side? He would never allow that to happen. He had to find a way. On her side, the female lead didn't feel like eating. And when she did eat, she felt like throwing up. Right now, she just wanted to be alone. She didn't understand why His Majesty was still not satisfied when she had been so serious. Suddenly, she thought of something. During the meal earlier, His Majesty's dining etiquette was always the opposite of hers. She suddenly realized that the books she had read might have been wrong. The maids were gossiping, having to prepare dinner again, mocking the queen for never having eaten good food. Only one maid knew that Liana was a very good person. At that moment, someone suddenly called her. It was the queen, inviting her to eat. Tina had no way to refuse. Her Highness the Queen picked up her fork. Soon, she finished eating, saluted, and left. The maids in the palace are servants who attend to the royal family. From the moment they enter the royal household, maids must receive basic, noble etiquette education. She understood that Mrs. Somerset had deceived her. She had anticipated that some families would not approve of her, as some maids already treated her with slight contempt. But she never expected it to be this severe for someone to personally do such a despicable thing without showing the slightest sign of looking down on her. She had underestimated the noble's malice towards her. She could no longer hide behind His Highness, living blindly with her eyes closed. She had to stand up for herself. The female lead went out to find His Highness and apologized to him. She already knew what had happened. His Majesty felt it was better to be clear. The punishment for Carolina would be for her to decide. As for the new teacher, she should discuss it with his aide. The female lead suggested she handle the matter herself. A maid who is forgiven for a mistake once will not make the same mistake again. No matter how well-educated a new maid is, she cannot compare to a maid who has corrected her mistakes. A terrible thought surfaced in Isla's mind. It would be better to just kill her. The female lead said she wanted to continue learning from her. She didn't want people to know she was hiding out of fear. Although punishing the Countess would make the nobles fearful, though it only be with His Majesty's help, not something she resolved herself. If this kind of thing happens again and again, that's what the nobles will think. She didn't want to live hiding behind His Majesty, but to stand up for herself. His Majesty respected her opinion, saying the head maid of the Queen's palace must be replaced, and the maids who follow the head maid must also be rescreened. He heard that Mrs. Somerset has deep ties with the head maid. If this continues, the public opinion will only get worse. Even though she had become like this, she didn't say a word, even though she was about to faint. The female lead was still very grateful that he had finished that meal with her. His Majesty didn't mind, just told her she didn't need to thank him anymore. Seeing that His Majesty was about to leave, she said that she had a very pleasant chat with him today. His Majesty was also happy to hear that. After returning, His Majesty wanted to send an invitation to Carolina. Just summon that woman alone. Betty, the eldest daughter of Count Somerset, heard about this and asked, and then, ever since the Queen had dinner, she hasn't come to class. He didn't know. The Countess never thought she would actually believe it. She was of lowly birth. What would a maid know about table manners? Her niece is like a fool, too. His Highness's face has been gloomy lately, probably because of that queen. But His Majesty has his own ideas. Although he can't abandon Aradna, he can prevent her from appearing in high society. The one standing by His Highness's side should be a noble like them, not some lowly woman. She believed her own daughter could definitely take the position of Empress. Her loving mother would definitely help her achieve it. At this moment, an invitation arrived from the palace. It was His Majesty the Emperor inviting her over. The two were very excited, thinking that something good was about to happen. The banquet hall of the main royal palace. Among the central nobility, only a few people close to the emperor were allowed access to this place. It was an occasion all nobles hoped to be invited to. As expected, it was very luxurious. The emperor smiled and said to her, "I hope the food is to your liking." The two chatted idly, mentioning her pet bird, Marilyn. She said this dish was truly delicious, worthy of being a royal dish. Even the sauce is exceptional. His Majesty asked if she liked the chef's cooking. This dish is called lovebird stew. The Countess thought she had misheard. His Majesty repeated it again and even gave a detailed description of the preparation process. Hearing this, she couldn't help but tremble all over. A group of people stood behind her. His Majesty said the dish on this plate is no different from those other birds you've eaten. He would not dine with others without his guards, nor would he, without purpose, invite a stranger into the banquet hall. The Countess was terrified that her bird had been eaten. His Majesty reassured her and told her to hurry up and eat. His Majesty threatened her. If she didn't like this one, there were other flavors. It's just that the portions are a bit large. The Countess was forced to eat the meat in front of her. The Countess came to teach the class with a bit of a headache. He was terrified thinking about what happened before. His Majesty truly cares about the Empress. With the Emperor's current attitude, it's bordering on a reign of terror. If he was displeased, the punishment could have been much more severe. Moreover, he wasn't sure if the woman before him knew. Now, she had to relearn table manners. After a demonstration, she asked the Countess how it was. She had learned it from Tina. The Countess was very surprised, so she knew all along and was just pretending not to. Liana forgave him this once, but there would be no next time. She walked over and asked her auntie if this outfit suited her. The female lead thought she was just too cute. Phoebe was still a little nervous about the new environment. She wanted to make new friends. Someone came over and said it was time to choose a horse to ride. He was going to pick a horse, one for horse riding. The female lead couldn't go today. She had other things to do. Unlike what she had worried about, Phoebe was full of energy. She had to work hard too. Mrs. Satissette's attitude had indeed changed drastically after that. She was about to make her debut in high society. She really didn't have much time now to change to a new teacher. Actually, she had told a lie in front of His Majesty. She said she only knew after seeing it. In reality, she didn't want him to know about her making mistakes in front of the maids because of the deep-seated insecurity she felt about herself. In this lonely place, she didn't know if she could keep going. It was time. She hadn't expected the person who came to be Deborah, the Deborah from not long ago, was inexplicably dragged away by the knights and brought to the royal palace. Then she was told to have an audience with His Majesty the Emperor here. But one thing was certain, Deborah was very good at reading the situation. One wrong word and she would die. The Emperor had her read a letter. It was written by the Empress. She thought she would never see Liana again in her life. She never thought Liana was still thinking of her. The Emperor gave her a chance to be the Empress's lady-in-waiting. She was not to have any other ideas, or the consequences would be severe. Things went smoothly after that. She was undergoing intensive basic training for a lady-in-waiting. Deborah did not let her guard down for a moment and was always very serious about meeting Liana. But due to etiquette, she could only curtsy deeply. She knelt down and asked for her name. She said it many times, but due to etiquette, she couldn't make eye contact with the Empress. But a chance glance revealed that Liana was crying. Deborah's firm resolve wavered. What was wrong with her? She called Anna over. The three of them were finally reunited. Although Liana's status had changed, the atmosphere was very harmonious. An hour later, the two sisters were both indignant, speaking up for her. So many things had truly happened during this time, but thankfully, they were here. The female lead asked how they got in. They said that His Majesty had summoned them, and she hadn't replied to the letters because she was receiving training to be a lady-in-waiting. The female lead thought they had broken off their friendship. If Liana had truly been living a life of luxury, perhaps this relationship would have ended in resentment and longing. But the truth was, she heard that Miss Natasha was living as a commoner and had even opened a dress shop. If it's Miss Natasha, she should do very well. After all, she is a person with a strong sense of fashion. That night, he finished reading the Empress's letter. He understood two things. 1. Liana was very attached to that lady-in-waiting and her family. 2. Liana's attitude towards him was light. It made him so angry he wanted to kill everyone. But he knew he couldn't do that. Binding Liana with only material possessions and power had its limits. So he did the opposite, bringing in Liana's friends. This was the most effective tool to keep Liana stable. He didn't understand Liana. For now, he could only use every means possible. He wasn't sure if Liana, after seeing her friends, would want to leave him even more. When he came in, Liana seemed to be writing something. On the floor were several letters addressed to him. The female lead was very embarrassed after being discovered. She hadn't intended for him to find out this way. He had said not to thank him for everything, so she wanted to write a letter. She wanted to say that she had a very happy day today. His Majesty was a little surprised to see it. He shyly asked if she had any other friends. She could choose them herself. From now on, she could decide on her own ladies-in-waiting. This was her duty. The female lead was very happy to hear this, feeling a sense of closeness to His Majesty. The adults were chatting in bed. She decided to have dinner in front of Deborah tomorrow. His Majesty said she was too thin, but Deborah had said that being too fat wasn't attractive. The lead, however, hoped she would be a little chubbier. That way, she would be more comfortable to hold. The female lead felt her soul leave her body when she heard that. She hugged the lead, which made her feel very cherished. The emotions she had hidden in her heart and tried hard to avoid were all laid bare. The female lead really liked the person before her. She hoped that one day she could truly touch his heart. And he must be happy, right? His Majesty should know very well. The question is Annie happy? Have you asked Annie that? He says that as long as she is happy, he is happy. So are you happy now?